In this study on Abraham, one of the lessons that we need to do is the study of Lot, his nephew, and that's what we're going to focus on this particular lesson. I'm calling it a consuming fire, and I'm going to take my lesson scripture text from Genesis, the 19th chapter, and verse 24. Then the Lord rained brimstone and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. And so he overthrew those cities, all the plain, all the inhabitants of the cities, and what grew on the ground. And he goes on then and speaks about Lot's family, what happened to him. I'm calling it a consuming fire because it was the fire of God's judgment. And it certainly relates to you and I today because a lot of the problems that we are facing in our world. We've got a lot of confused people in our world. And not only confused people, but you have to understand there are demonic forces at work in our world. And many people don't realize what an influence those demon spirits are having upon them and upon the decisions that they make. And so this story, it's a tragedy, but it needs to be discussed because it's a part of the story of Abraham. Let's see what we can learn from this story. It's so sad that you can be so close to what God is doing and totally miss it. That's Lot. Abram became Abraham, the father of the faithful. Lot lost everything but his own soul. Everything. His wife, his children, and the grandchildren grew up, to be the enemies of the people of God. My, what a tragedy. What a human tragedy. One of the things that I need to point out here, though, is there is no record in Lot's life of him ever building an altar and seeking God. You never see him praying. You never see him seeking after God. That ought to be a warning that we pass on to everyone. Now that's one of the things that I've seen, and I said to the young man that was saying to me about Adam and Eve that you can't prove that they ever lived. I said, no, and neither can you prove they didn't live. That happened a long time ago, thousands of years ago, before written records were even kept. Everything then was an oral tradition that was passed on, the stories that were told. But yet, I've lived long enough that I'm able to look back over my lifetime and people that have faith in God and people that chose not to have faith in God. The comparison between their lives, there is no comparison, none whatsoever. Children I have seen that have been raised in church, but they decided to go the ways of the world, and yet have been married 4 and 5 times. What a tragedy. It's not because my wife and I are any smarter that we're getting ready to celebrate 48 years of marriage. No, it's not because we're better. It's simply because of Christ and because we totally have given our lives to Him. And that's what we find here. No record of Lot ever praying and seeking after God. He's just seeking after the things of this world. The tragedy is he followed his uncle Canaan, but it didn't end there. They went down to Egypt, and that's where he gets in trouble. He learns the ways of Egypt. Soon the great wealth that they had amassed forces them to separate and go different directions. And what Abram does is act in faith. He didn't have to do what he did, but he says unto Lot, choose what you want. Go whichever direction you desire. I will go the opposite. Abram didn't have to do that. He's the father of it, so to speak. He's the grand old man. He has the authority. He could have told Lot what he was going to get, but he doesn't because he's acting in faith. And the truth is, God blessed Abram on the mountains of the hills of Judea with a flock of sheep more than Lot prospered in the well-watered plains of the Jordan Valley. And God's able to do the same thing for you. God's able to bless you in places that people are trying to leave, trying to escape, get away, because all they see is the hard life, the difficulties. See, but with every choice that we make comes consequences. Every choice. I've heard them debate over, is drinking wine a sin? Jesus turned water to wine. And I've heard those kind of debates over and over. I know of a pastor that he argued those things. He said, there's nothing in the Bible that says drinking a glass of wine will send you to hell. And so he did. He chose to do that. He could handle it, but his 4 children could not. And all 4 of his children became alcoholics. Why? With every choice you make comes the consequences. It's a part of the decision. And when Lot chose to go to the well-watered plains of the Jordan Valley, there was something else there. He knew was there. Sodom and Gomorrah. And the Bible says of Sodom and Gomorrah, he knew this. They were exceedingly wicked sinners before God. But he made his choice. With the choice he made comes the consequences. Now let me show you 4 looks I see in this story. The way that 4 people looked at Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot's look is the first one. It was a selfish look. He's thinking of himself. He's trying to take the best for himself. He's actually trying to take advantage of his uncle Abram. He's trying to choose the best. The tall grass makes fat cows and fat sheep, and that's all he's thinking about. He could care less about Sodom. The Bible said that when he looked at this well-watered plain, it reminded him of Zoar in Egypt. Now, how does he know about Zoar in Egypt? Because Abram took him there. There's another bad decision. The consequences was Abram was able to get Lot out of Egypt, but he could never get Egypt out of Lot's mind, out of his thinking. He still remembered it. He's thinking about it. That's what I want. That's the part that I want for myself. Now, let me show you another look. Think about God's look. When God looked at Sodom and Gomorrah, what did he see? He's looking from a spiritual aspect. It's a spiritual look. And the Bible said he saw the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked. In fact, and we will look at this in detail in Abram's life later, but the Bible said, God said when he came down to investigate Sodom and Gomorrah, he said, I've come to see if the cry of that city is as bad as the cry that ascends to heaven. In other words, every sin has a cry. That's why God had come. God is looking to investigate the cry that's coming up from the city to see if it was worth saving. In other words, God's looking for some righteous people. That's what he's looking for righteous people there. See, the question about Sodom and Gomorrah, the question is not if it can be saved. No. The question is it worthy to be saved? When Abram says to God, will not the judge of all the earth do what's right? That's God's problem. He has to do what's right. He's forced to do it. And so God's looking for a way that he can save the city. He's looking for some righteous people. And it's a tragedy. We can only find one righteous man in the whole city. Now, another one that we need to examine is Lot's wife. Lot's wife, the way that she looked at Sodom. The angels had warned them, get out of the city, do not look back. Boy, it was a very clear commandment of God. Do not look back to the city. But Lot's wife can't resist. She cannot resist the temptation of looking back just one last time. It's obvious she loves Sodom. There's something in Sodom, whether it was her house, the treasures in her house, I don't know. The Bible doesn't tell us, but there was something there that though God had commanded them, don't look back, she can't resist it. She turns to look back one more time. I think it's quite obvious. She has Sodom in her heart. She loved Sodom. She has Sodom in her heart. And so it's a lustful look of wanting whatever it was that Sodom had. And so when she does, we know the story. It's these next verses. When she turned and looked back, she identified with them. She received their reward. The same judgment that was falling on Sodom fell on her, and she was turned to a pillar of salt, burnt crisp, nothing but a stone that is left of what was Lot's wife. What a tragedy. What a tragedy. And Jesus warns us about this. This is one of the things that Jesus says to you and I. Remember Lot's wife. Boy, why would he say that? He talking about that as it was in the days of Noah. And then he also talked as it was in the days of Sodom and Gomorrah. Remember Lot's wife. I caution you, don't fall in love with the world. You do, it's going to bring great, great tragedy into your own life. And so when he's told that, do remember her, he's saying she's looking for a place that she can return and go back to Sodom again. What a tragedy. What a tragic story for Lot. One other look that I want to point out, and that is the look of Abram. Abram's look. Abram never forgot about his nephew Lot. In fact, that's what he's thinking about when God stopped by to tell him about the impending judgment for Sodom and Gomorrah. He's thinking about Lot, so he starts interceding for the city. If there's just 10 righteous, will you not save it for 10 righteous men? And God said, I will save it. What's Abram thinking about? He doesn't say it, but he's thinking about his family. He's thinking about his nephew, about Lot and his family. Probably, the Bible doesn't say this, but we can read it into the story. He feels guilty about taking Lot to Egypt in the first place. He knew that was his bad decision. I'm the one that took him there. I'm the one that exposed him to this. And he probably is feeling the guilt of the failure of not providing for him. See, I really believe that this is the story of Adam and Eve. I think that's why Adam ate the forbidden fruit, is because he knew he had failed his wife. He was responsible to guard the garden. The Bible is very clear that he was not deceived. Eve was deceived. She didn't know. She was confused about what was happening, but Adam wasn't. Then why would Adam turn his back on God? Because he knew he had failed his wife. He had failed the woman that he loved. And as he sees her standing there with the forbidden fruit and the bite missing, he knows she has eaten it. And so I think this is what he's saying. I will die with her. Do you understand? That is a picture of what Jesus did for you and I. Jesus, it wasn't his sin, it was ours. But he took our sin upon himself, and that's why he died. Greater love hath no man than this, a man lay down his life for his friends. So I think this is the thing that is motivating Abram. He can't forget, I'm the one that took him to Egypt. I started him on this direction. I failed him. Oh my, the guilt that comes from that. I find it interesting, though, that the Bible says it was Abram's prayer that brought Lot and his family out of Sodom. It's on down in the end of this chapter, chapter 19, where it says, it came to pass when God overthrew the cities of the plain that God remembered Abram and brought Lot out of the midst of it. Wow. What a testimony. In other words, it was because Abraham prayed and interceded that God delivered Lot, or he would have been destroyed in the fiery judgment that came upon Sodom and Gomorrah. Now that tells me something. That tells me that you and I can pray for people. This world is going to experience the judgment of God. The wrath of God is coming, and it should be one of the things that motivates us. I know it certainly motivates me. It keeps me going. It keeps the fire burning inside of me, the passion, that because I don't want people to be lost. I don't want people to go to hell. How can you go to sleep on people dying and going to hell? It's the thing that keeps me going. I don't want them to do that. They don't have to. If I will intercede, if I will pray, God will find a way to save them. And that's what happens in this story. God brought Lot and his family out of Sodom because of Abraham's prayer. Now, I need to insert something here about Lot and just focus on him for a few minutes here. Let's talk about how he lost his family, because this is one of those tragic stories in the Bible that we should learn from, and then we should warn others about it. How did he lose his family? The first thing I want to establish is Lot was not a bad man. The Bible said he was a righteous man. That's what your Bible said, the New Testament. It's found in 2 Peter, the 2nd chapter, verses 6 through 9. Righteous Lot. God said that about him. So it's not he is a good man making bad decisions. Have you ever seen that happen? Have you ever made that mistake? He's going the wrong way, making the wrong choices. But he's a carnal man, and he's making the decisions based on what he sees with the natural eye rather than building an altar, seeking God's will, and doing what God directs him. He's doing what he wants to do that he thinks is going to prosper him and bring him money and bring him wealth. He's a carnal man. And so Lot makes some tragic mistakes that cost him his family. Let me show you some of them. He never built any altars. He simply followed his uncle Abraham. Wow. It's not enough for your mom and dad to take you to church. No, it's not enough for them to pray. You've got to build your own altar. You've got to meet Christ for yourself. Someone has well said, God doesn't have any grandchildren. In other words, you have a personal relationship with him, or you don't have a relationship with him. It's that simple. So he never built any altars. It says in Genesis 12th chapter, verse 4, and Lot went with him. Talking about Abram. He went with him. The second thing I see, he makes an idol of wealth. That's the big sin in the United States. Greed, the love of money. It's a tragedy. We have traded our marriages for money. We've traded our children for money. We've traded, and people, I've seen them do it. I've seen them leave a good church and move to a city where they know nothing because they're promised a better job, and they And I'm not saying God doesn't lead people sometimes, but many times it's obvious God didn't lead them because they dropped out of church. Their children lost out with God. That's a tragedy. So he makes an idol out of wealth. It says in Genesis 13:10, looking at the plain of Jordan, it was well watered everywhere. And he's thinking, I'm going to get rich. I'm going to make money. It was a trap, a trap. The third thing I see, he's making selfish choices. He's not thinking about anyone else. In Genesis, the 13th chapter, verse 11, it said, then Lot chose for himself. That's exactly what was motivating him. He's not thinking about his family. He's not thinking about his daughters. He's thinking about himself. The fourth thing I see, he disregards warnings of danger. This happened when there was an invasion that happened, and these four kings invaded the area, and the Bible said they took Lot and his family as slaves, as captives. Abram, of course, came and by faith was able to deliver them and set them free from that bondage. But what does Lot do? He turns right back around and goes back to Sodom again, even though there was a clear warning that this was not the right place to be. The fifth thing I see, he becomes a leader in Sodom. Let me show you this. This is in chapter 19 and verse 1. It said, Lot sat in the gate. That's where the city fathers would sit. That's where important decisions were made for the city. So he's become one of the leaders in Sodom. The sixth thing I see, he compromises his convictions. And I take this from Genesis 19:7, where he's saying, he's talking to these Sodomites that are wanting to come in and to physically abuse these angels that's in his house. They're coming, and he says to them, I pray you, brethren, don't do so wickedly. He's looking a Sodomite in the eye and calling him brother. Wow. My, what a tragic story. He's willing to even sacrifice his daughters for the lust of these men. What a tragic story. No wonder it ends in such a disaster, a consuming fire of God's judgment. The seventh thing that I see, he's willing to sacrifice his family and for his so-called friends. He says in verse 8, behold, I've got two daughters, and he's offering the daughters to try to appease these horribly immoral men. My, what a tragic story. This eighth thing, he delays to obey God. My, if you want to write a story of how not to live your life, this is a classic example. The Bible says in chapter 19 and verse 16, while he lingered. The angel is saying, get out, get out. The judgment of God is coming. The fire of God's going to consume him. And it said, while he lingered, God being merciful to him, they took him by the hands and they led them out of Sodom. He, his wife, and his two daughters. The two angels had their hands full. A classic example of the wrong way to live. Something else, he refuses to submit to spiritual authority. My. I find that in chapter 19 and verse 18, where the angels are saying to him, escape to the mountains, get out of here because the judgment of God is coming. And he's saying, oh, not so, my Lord, let us stay. Have you ever told God no? Have you ever been like Simon Peter, who rebuked the Lord? No, Lord, it will never happen to you. Not so, Lord. I've never eaten anything like this. That's a mistake. What's the basic error? The basic problem is you are not submitting to God's authority. And that's what he was doing. He's still, with a rebellious heart, a selfish nature, going the wrong way. And then I think one of the most tragic one of them all is He was insensitive to his family's needs. Oh my, you read Genesis, the 19th chapter, and it makes you want to cry. And one of those verses that just totally destroys me, I just can hardly handle it, is it says, he knew not when she lay down, nor when she arose. It's a story there about drunken incest, is what it's about. How the two daughters, they got them out of Sodom, but they didn't get Sodom out of the girls. And they're saying, we don't have a husband, let's get our father drunk, and we'll have children by our father. And twice this statement is made. He did not know when she came. He did not know when she left. Oh, I've seen that happen. I've seen it happen in homes. I've had fathers come to me crying and saying, I didn't know what was going on. What a tragedy. As a father, you're supposed to know. As a father, but he's totally insensitive to them. And the story ends up such a sordid mess because he's made the wrong choices, made the wrong decisions. It's not surprising that God could not find 10 righteous people in the city when he's made those decisions. I was talking to my son-in-law not too long ago about this, how that years ago I was youth pastor in a church, and I remember I was seeking God about some of the young ladies that had started dating boys that were not Christians, some of the young ladies in my youth group. And I remember one of the girls ended up the child out of wedlock, and I'm crying out to God. I'm praying, and oh God, as Christians, we are supposed to be the strong ones. As believers, he that's in us is greater than he that's in the world. And I'm seeking God, and God spoke to me. And here's what he said. How can they expect to lead others to Christ when they themselves are living in disobedience to my word? Boy, that is the truth. When we make the choice, we make the decision, we're not going to follow God. We're going to do our own thing. We're going our own way. We're only setting ourselves up for problems. This is what happened with Lot. Lot lost all spiritual influence over his family, all whatsoever. He seemed like a joke to them. That's what he said in chapter 19 and verse 14. He seemed like a joke to his sons-in-law, the young men that his daughters were going to marry. He seemed like a joke. They don't believe his testimony. He's lost his testimony with them. And it ends up this sordid mess of drunken incest. What a tragic story. It's in your Bible. It's in my Bible. And I've lived long enough. I've seen people make these kind of decisions and end up with these kind of results. This is the way not to live. Don't follow the example of Lot. Follow the example of Abraham. No, Abraham wasn't perfect. Sure, he made some bad decisions, but he always went back to the altar. Lot never built an altar. Lot he's living off of his uncle's prayers. He's living off of his uncle's faith. And the end result was he ends up with the judgment of God coming upon him. The fire that fell on Sodom destroys everything that meant anything to him. His wife is gone. He lost his daughters. They become the mothers of the Ammonites and the Moabites. Both of those were the enemies of the Israelites, the people of God. Continually, this is where it all started. That's where it all starts. He lost everything but his own soul. It's a serious lesson, but it's important that we examine it because it's a part of this story. And it's a warning to every one of us. Do not follow the example of Lot. Build you an altar and meet with God And let God help you live a righteous life, not fall into the trap in which Lot fell into and lost everything but his own soul. Thank you.